Then I read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and sort of my whole macro thesis was shaped around that, saying, okay, I get where the world is going, debasement of currency, etc. And all of a sudden now, Bitcoin made sense to me from not only from a technology perspective, but also from an investment perspective. And for a technologist like me, who understands the tech, there's no Bitcoin CEO. There's no one morning you wake up and the management team did something stupid. It's just pure technology and it works. And I understood the white paper. And so I went pretty heavy as an investor at that moment in time in Bitcoin, while continuing to support the entrepreneurial community. While I was doing that, and I'm trying to shrink the story here, but I share this. While I do that, 3IQ was being created. So I'm not the founder of 3IQ. This is the first time I've joined a company where I in a leadership role at this level where I was not the founder. But basically, what had happened in Canada.
Hey. Grab your bootstraps, yeah, let's scale your growth. Here's the truth, Jack. We'll reach the globe, unveil the notes.
What the fuck?
Earn your digits, won't burn, you'll get it. See, this is factual. Funds will show, learn to flow with Candid Capital.
This is a Candid Capital interview. In these episodes, we host industry business professionals involved in the global tech ecosystem to discuss various topics related to tech, global economy, and building sustainable businesses and investments.
All right, in this episode, we explore the evolving world of institutional digital assets and regulated crypto investment with Pascal Saint-Jean, president of CEO and 3IQ, one of the pioneering firms behind Canada's first publicly listed Bitcoin and Ethereum products. Welcome, Pascal.
Thank you, Josh, for having me.
It's great for us to finally be able to do this. I know we've tried a few times.
We live in the same city, but it took months because, yes, there's so much happening globally, but appreciate it. And I'm glad we were able to connect today.
Yeah, that's great. So 3IQ has been a key player in shaping how institutional and retail investors access digital assets through compliant, transparent vehicles. As the crypto market matures and global regulation clarifies, there's never been a more important time to understand where this space is heading. So now you know what this episode is about. Let's get into it. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your career. How'd you get into tech, finance, and what led you to 3IQ?
Great question. I'll try to sum this up in just a few minutes. But I got very fortunate. So my family is from northern Quebec, and basically in the late 90s moved to Ottawa to be closer to family, because like we all know, rural communities, when factories and mines close down, people migrate to the major cities. So I came to Ottawa at the right moment, at the right time in a career, at a time where I was basically enamored by the internet. It was starting. I was an engineer. I'm an engineer by trade now, but you're talking about a teenager figuring out his way in the world. Basically just following anything that could do with tech, and coming to a city where all of a sudden it was Silicon Valley North, right? So Ottawa at that time was just booming with some major players that were competing with the U.S. mega players, right? We had Corel, Nortel, Mitel, and all these others. And so really got lucky and started my career really in Web 1. So I share this because it has everything to do. My whole career has followed the trends of the web. So my first business had to do with the sort of the boom of the internet. Got funding, and basically figured my way into the business world, although I was an engineer, but was really passionate about using tech and business to bring something to the world. And fast forward into 2006, 2007, had a small exit on the technology side, just a lot of lessons learned. I got really fortunate, had some great mentors in Ottawa that taught me a lot. And so the next business was much more ready. And I was at that point focused on sort of the what was Web 2 really about. There was this sort of movement of open source, talking about sort of REST, APIs and JSON, so the ability to abstract coding from being able to create content in the world, because Web 1 was great for the consumer, but if you wanted to participate in the creation of content, it was very difficult if you didn't know how to code. So Web 2 was that whole movement, and open source really as a business model, as a way to giving back to the community, as a way to just create acceleration in the R&D world. Like, why do I have to spend all this money to create a login system when we could just, build it together and build innovation on top. And so my second company was much more focused on utilizing open source technologies. And we were providing essentially services and tools to create enterprise social networks before Facebook even existed. So very early adopting of seeing the network effects. And so, got involved in the open source communities of different projects we were utilizing, giving back to, for example, one laptop per child, codes, dollars, etc., being on the board of advisors of different open source projects. And that's how I discovered actually Bitcoin from a technology perspective.
What year did you discover Bitcoin?
2013. But at that point, most of my investing was done back in my business. So I discovered it from a technology perspective. My background in engineering was distributed systems, so it made sense to me. But I kind of left it there. I was like, okay, this cool open source tech, understand it, but it comes back into my life a few years later. So fast forward to 2016, I sell the open source business, have a nice exit, start a family office. And at that point, just being transparent with the audience, it had been, over, almost 15 years of just nonstop since 2000 to that point, nonstop of just pushing and grinding and scaling. And so I needed a break from founder mode and decided to just, do more local investing and supporting, joining board of advisors, fractional executive work, mentoring some of the up and coming rising stars in Ottawa. And then started looking at where we're going to deploy capital. It can't all go into venture. That's a little too risky, so to me compared to Bitcoin. But anyways, lo and behold, I started becoming. I know. But wait. Let me finish that. Why did I find it less risky? Right, and this is to me. Right, I have to be careful what I say. But for me, for my investor style, right. So I go back and I became enamored with macro. Right, just as an investor now, all of a sudden putting the entrepreneurship aside. Studied the intelligent investor, became a student of the Warren Buffett methodology, et cetera. I was trying to deploy capital into the markets. I was like, none of this makes sense. And the valuations don't make sense. And nothing makes sense anymore. Then I read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and sort of my whole macro thesis was shaped around that, saying, okay, I get where the world is going, debasement of currency, et cetera. And all of a sudden now, Bitcoin made sense to me from not only from a technology perspective, but also from an investment perspective. And for a technologist like me, who understands the tech, there's no Bitcoin CEO. There's no one morning you wake up and the management team did something stupid. It's just pure technology and it works. And I understood the white paper. And so I went pretty heavy as an investor at that moment in time in Bitcoin while continuing to support the entrepreneurial community. While I was doing that, and I'm trying to, shrink the story here, but I share this, while I do that, 3IQ was being created. So I'm not the founder of 3IQ. This is the first time I've joined a company where in a leadership role at this level where I was not the founder. But basically what had happened in Canada was there was a movement in crypto globally. And we heard the Mt. Gox stories, but Canada had its own moment with Quadriga, right? There's a Netflix documentary on it. So at that moment in time, the founders of 3IQ, who came from Fidelity and other large asset managers, for them said it's time, they had helped bring gold as a regulated product back in the 80s to Canada and other things, said it's time for this to be regulated and for Canadians to have a safe, secure, simple way to access this. And so they went on a mission to get this regulated. It was a 5-year journey. They rolled the dice on it. They as true entrepreneurs, basically got it done by suing the government and the regulators and won the case. And so we, 3IQ was able to bring to market a regulated product. How I came to the space, those two worlds were colliding. They had gotten approval, right? All of a sudden, they're like, wow, this has to turn into a real business. It cannot just be a Bitcoin product forever. So, how do we start searching for individuals who have a track record of scaling businesses? And that's how we met, through common networks and common friends. I had started becoming pretty well known at helping businesses scale. I had been in Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. It made a lot of sense to me in terms of where that was going. And so I was looking on what my next move or play was going to be from a business perspective. And so when 3IQ came knocking, I was also looking at, do I start something? Where do I park myself to play the Web3 space? Because I played Web 1, Web 2. And so it was a match. It was a pretty good match, and it made sense. And history was made there 3+ years ago when I joined. And then more recently taking on the president and CEO role to help continue scaling 3IQ globally. But that's my career. That's 3IQ's kind of sort of birth history and how we met in the middle.
So, for those listening, what is 3IQ and how does it work?
Yeah. So 3IQ is a digital asset manager. So we call ourselves crypto native, but we do a great job at blending, okay, let's take a step back. We believe at helping drive the space forward. You could be an asset manager and be like, hey, right now the hot trade is, treasuries. So let's go and launch a treasury ETF, or the hot trade is covered calls on the S&P 500. So let's launch an S&P 500 covered call ETF and just be an ETF issuer, or just be an asset manager in general. We believe that, that digital assets and crypto and that technology and Web3 can continue to transform the world, just like what Web 1 and Web 2 did. And so as an asset manager, growth of adoption, growth of regulatory adoption, political adoption, investor adoption is part of our mission. And so 3IQ's mission is to advance the space by being a leader in the asset management space. Everyone has a different role. You have some tech providers, you have people who lobby government, et cetera. We play that role by bringing, simplified access to these vehicles to the world over. So as an asset manager, we're known in Canada for our ETFs and our products that we've created. But since then, we've done multiple different things. We've, moved the sort of the concept of staking. So how do we bake in staking into these regulated products to secure the networks and give access to investors to a better product? We've brought on institutional investors by creating risk managed solutions and sub-advisory. So we are now consulting and advising some of the larger institutions globally who want to catch up now. They used to go and saying, let's ignore this space. And now they're seeing governments catch up, BlackRock in the game, Fidelity in the game, and saying, how do we now catch up? So they need a partner. And so 3IQ is educating, consulting, and providing white label services for them. And then we're also investing heavily in R&D because the whole goal is to get on chain, right? This adoption, regulatory clarity, institutional adoption. The end game is to, where Web3 is really going to shine, is the technology needs to be adopted globally, accepted globally. And that's when you get sort of the global change to empower people in emerging markets, in first world countries, et cetera. So the true transformation from Web 2 to Web 3. And so we invest heavily in R&D into becoming an on-chain asset manager, et cetera. So everything we do is to progress the space forward with the lens of an asset manager, but we're much more than just an ETF issuer today. But that's where we started here in Canada.
So I'm not sure if you can answer this because it might be how the cake's made. But, there's lots of digital assets and you don't do all of them.
Correct.
And so, what is the threshold for you deciding that one is, the one?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Fundamentally, there's different ways of giving access to individuals. And so when we look at it now, there's basically, how do we create a framework with the regulators, right? That framework will dictate what you could give access to individuals, right? And so at the beginning of 3IQ's history, it was much more one-offs. We see an asset class, scale in market cap. We see the on-chain adoption. So we're seeing the developer movement on that chain. We're seeing user adoption. We're seeing real projects being built. And so our analyst team and our research team, we all look at that, right? And so, yes, it's easy to say this, chain has X amount market cap, but by itself is not enough. And it's also not just, they have a big Twitter following or an X following. It's about what's happening on chain, because that's what we look at for long-term sustainability of that. So once we analyze that and we see that, that's when we try to say it's time to bring it to market. The good news now is over the past few years, we've been able to work with the CSA and the OSC and others in Canada and build a framework now. So there's a very clear framework of what will or will not be allowed for Canadians in an ETF format. And that is around the regulated futures market. Now, we could argue if that's the right mechanism or not to judge if something should be accepted or not, but that is today until we see what happens in the US and if Canada is going to shift its thinking for now, and that's why we've been able to launch a series of new products around chains that have checked all the boxes that we've analyzed. But now there's regulated futures markets, and so from a regulatory perspective, market makers could hedge their positions, price manipulation a little less likely to happen, and they're on regulated global exchanges. And so those were the check boxes that they were looking for. And so that's how we select them today. Now, in terms of how we give access to what's happening on chain or what's happening for institutional investors, right now, it's really about liquidity. If you're a large, sovereign fund, if you're a large family office, if you're a large institutions, you may have a venture bucket, and that's different. You may want to go into the emerging technology of crypto and do that as a basket, or go through a venture fund, and you're okay with that. But if you're looking to deploy big dollars in a liquid product, liquidity matters. And right now, there's only a few of these assets that have global liquidity at a size enough for you to deploy capital. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of institutions start with Bitcoin and starting to get educated on other layer 1 Web3 chains, because those are starting to emerge not only in use case, in volume from a true application, but also at a size that institutions can deploy.
So you guys are global, and so the Canadian framework is now what you're using to influence your decisions on other assets and other jurisdictions.
Correct.
Is it primarily like regulatory first, obviously, because you want to be compliant, and then you have your own check boxes? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So there are two mechanisms there, right? So we only issue public vehicles out of Canada. And then everything else we do globally is more on the advisory side or the private market side. So the hedge funds, the white label solutions, et cetera. At that point, we can be much more flexible because it's not retail accessible. It's not designed to be retail accessible. So it's much more of a bespoke, customized solution for the institutions we're working for. With that being said, the work we've done in Canada, we've become known at helping sort of write the playbook. We have played a role in different jurisdictions with different partners to educate those regulators on how the Canadian regulators see this. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a copy paste, but we had strong influence in Australia. Now there's a growing ETF market there. We have some partners there. Our parent company, now we have a parent company, is Monex Group out of Japan. The Japanese markets are the exchanges are open to retail, but in terms of ETFs and public vehicles, not yet accessible, regulations changing. And so we're working with our parent company and the local groups to bring sort of lessons learned from Canada and what's happening there. They, of course, are looking at what's happening in the US. And so we try to use our lessons learned over the past 10 plus years and our brand that we've built by working with the Canadian regulators. And so we do get approached by other jurisdictions to give our opinion or to better study what happened here. And so even though we're not issuing other products yet, that may change in the future in different jurisdictions, it doesn't mean that we're not, but we are still using our lessons learned from Canada to help grow the space globally.
Well, with everything in the US and the last couple acts passed and whatnot, it's I think changing the dynamics.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I saw your XRP media post. Yeah. So is that going to be available in Canada as well, or no?
So it is. It's available as of last week. So it's the first week of trading, and so those were some of the assets. So Solana. So the first, like I said, Bitcoin and Ethereum were the first two approved, and then more recently we launched Solana and XRP. Because of the regulatory clarity and framework that we were able to achieve in Canada. Now, will there be regulated futures for other chains? Most likely, I think we're about to see an explosion of innovation coming from the US. There's been a complete 180 happening there. Happy to talk about the good and the bad and the ugly. There's some really good stuff happening. I think David Sachs was the right individual from AI and crypto czar. Some of the policies they've written made a lot of sense. The Genius Act on the stablecoin side makes sense. There's also some ugly things like some of the meme coins and some of those things that just hurt the brand. But I think the more we travel globally and the more we work with global institutions, people are starting to get that there's a bifurcated market. There's always going to be the meme coin side, right? Because it's so easy to do. but the blue chips are real. Projects are being built on top of these blue chip chains. Bitcoin is seen as becoming more and more accepted and seen as a macro hedge. And so, so yes, there's a sort of that K-shaped bifurcation of the adoption of crypto. Just like in traditional markets, I tend to give the example, you cannot compare, the TSX or the NASDAQ to the TSX Venture or some of the, junior exchanges and the Nordic Junior Exchange in Europe. Like, there's a lot of crap that gets launched in these public markets on the venture, on the Nordic, et cetera, that I would never recommend anyone to touch. But you see that in public markets. You could launch, anything public, you may not want to touch it. And that's different than a blue chip institutional company that's listed on the NASDAQ, NYSE, or the TSX. And so we're seeing that with crypto as well.
So, from my opinion, again, the ETF stuff is nice for Canada. It's still, I would say, very TradFi-ish.
Yes. Yeah.
But from your point of view and from maybe the conversations you've had or what you're seeing, particularly out of the US, how long do you think Canada could keep their head in the sand on regulation, the way this market is going down south? Because the signal does not seem like we're doing much.
Yeah.
Do you think we can stay in this space or compete in this space without maybe trying to at least align with the market that we do the most business with, as opposed to aligning with the Europeans, for example?
Yeah. So I was just at the a conference last week around trying to educate the political minds on the opportunity. So if we take a step back, there's just a reality, and this is my opinion, not 3IQ's opinion, is there's a reason why I've guided the company more global. I'm Canadian. I'm from Ottawa. I love the innovation spirit that we bring. We tend to struggle with global scale as a company, right? And fundamentally, Canada did have a lead, like 3IQ. Yes, we had to press and challenge the regulators. That gave a springboard moment for us, to take the potential lead. So we had regulatory clarity. The regulators in Canada were celebrated globally, as innovators, even though, but the legal battle aside, once it got approved globally, there was wow, they're doing something pretty cool over there. So there was this opportunity. Ethereum, Vitalik was in Toronto. It was built in Canada. And so there could have been this opportunity to take the momentum that was generated by the win that 3IQ got from a regulatory perspective, to take the fact that the second largest project, Ethereum, was based in Canada, and Vitalik wanted to keep it here and wanted to, set up the foundation here, could not, so moved to Switzerland, where they became much more friendly to crypto foundations. And at the same time, you still had a decent amount of population that wanted to access to crypto. And so you saw the larger companies, good or bad, try to enter the Canadian space. And that's where things took a turn to the south, where there was there wasn't really a desire to, springboard from that momentum. And so, Ethereum essentially moved to Switzerland. And so a lot of the innovation just moved offshore from a technology perspective. Some of the larger players that tried to enter Canada, unfortunately, were the wrong players. So FTX tried to buy a company in Canada. And when they blew up, that kind of, put the regulators backwards. And then we were not provided with any clear framework on how can we continue to innovate. And so all of a sudden, momentum stalled, and we had to make a choice, right? We had to make a choice of, if we couldn't onboard with global counterparties into Canada, if we couldn't, get access to global derivatives, if we couldn't innovate into new ETFs, then we were stuck with just our two products. That is not a sustainable, scalable business. And so we went on the mission of becoming more global, finding the right partner to expand globally, which we did. And so that's now why we are a global company, and our momentum is global. It's been exciting to see the past 6 months where, because of what's happened in the US, it's given a new breath in Canada. So we're seeing momentum with some institutions wanting to get educated, wanting to launch things. And so all these sort of hybrid underground teams that were happening in the banks, that were happening in the asset management side of Canada, were able to now finally get their head out of the water and openly say, yeah, we've been working or researching this for the past few years, and now we could talk about it without, being afraid. And so there has been some good come from the US. I think it's given new life of what can be done in Canada. Are we going to be a global leader? No. Can it be an industry that has an impact for the Canadian markets? I believe so, which is why, we're back here investing, which is why I'm here doing a lot of work again with on the political side, as well as just the media side, to try to say, we're proud of being Canadian. We've gotten tons of momentum globally, but I want to make sure that this continues to grow in Canada.
So where do you see us like globally? Because I mean, every conference I'm at,
Yeah,
we're leaders in everything. So, but
you're saying that you're seeing we are?
no, I'm
No.
saying every conference says that we are leaders.
Oh, yes.
in everything.
Yeah,
But from a policy perspective,
Yeah.
and even what you guys did here in Canada, that was a while ago.
it was, yes.
And so we have MiCAs in Europe.
Yep.
We have the Genius and Stablecoin Act
Yep.
in the US.
Yep.
Different Asian jurisdictions have been, I would say, far ahead in what they want to see for their markets.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where's Canada in all of this?
So I think where we have an opportunity is to blend the best of both worlds, right? So if we never took the opportunity to create crypto specific regulation, which some jurisdictions have. If it's done properly, it can spearhead innovation. We've seen that with Vara in Dubai, attracting a lot of talent. Singapore as well. MiCA, some people love or hate MiCA, but at least they've tried to they're trying to create crypto specific innovation. So we never had that here in Canada. That was a missed opportunity. But what Canada, this is just again where I think where we can make an impact globally. Our financial economy and our banks are well respected globally. They're stable, they're large, they're integrated with government, and so this is it's a long shot, but there's a desire of really making a move to make sure that our financial system continues to be seen as a leader globally, or to be a powerhouse that it is. In my mind, it has to continue to integrate some of this more innovative technologies. And so what I would love to see is this coming together of the innovative spirit that a lot of Canadian entrepreneurs have, with on the crypto side specifically and the AI side specifically, and collaborating more closely with the large players. You have to scale globally, you have to find these partners. And so there's this opportunity of merging the innovative spirit, right? I don't think that we're going to create a solo multi-billion-dollar company if there's no integration or collaboration with the banks. And so how do you create, a political will to invest into this space, or to at least enable it to thrive without blocking it, and then finding and then empowering our global powerhouse banks to adopt some of this technology, to test the R&D, to help them transform for the new age. And then all of a sudden Canada can play a role in showcasing how Web3 and crypto can integrate into TradFi to create something new. Because that's how technology always works. Historically, whether you looked at the internet or anything else, there's a vision, or even open source or AI, et cetera. There's a vision from the founding sort of community of what it can do. But in the end is, as much as you may say this technology is meant to disrupt and displace, the reality is it scales by integrating, right? Microsoft today is an open source powerhouse. The ethos back 20 years ago was open source was there to destroy Microsoft.
Well,
right?
I mean, that's I think one of the reasons why stablecoin is exploding is because it's a bridging function.
And that's we're missing the mark in Canada on that right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the most disappointing thing that we're doing right now in this space. Is that it's a security.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. If you had the political will, there's a lot of innovation that could still happen in Canada, integrated into big partners like the banks.
But it also makes kind of sense because the two party groups you've mentioned, the government and the banks, specifically in Canada, view it as, like they're protecting their spot.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the thing is with stablecoins, you don't need a bank. You could do the whole process without a bank unless you need fiat. But you could theoretically.
So look, there's the long term, there's what the technology can do, and then there's the reality of how things function, right? So technology adoption in the end, right? Whether it is a third party trusted source or not, or an obfuscation of the technology through a better user interface. I do think there's a role to play with some of these larger players in adoption. First of all, to, just study history. Anyone who plays protectionism loses long term. So that and yes, that's you could say it's whoever the leaders are today, it's not their problem tomorrow. Okay, it's the protect your job today versus the benefits of everyone else tomorrow. But ideally, if we have strong leaders in our financial institutions and government that say, look, let's play for the future. All right, let's do what we're supposed to do, which is to build for the future. And I think there's still hope to do that. But yes, if they choose to play protectionism and ignore, then we're gonna pay the price in the future. Because
I do agree with you on that, because I think they can do that so long as our demographics are still much older.
Yeah,
But that's not the group that's going to migrate.
correct.
And, if we're just looking at our banking system in general, we have not done open banking, open finance here. Not like what you're seeing in a lot of other places.
Yep.
And, if you've played with any of those tools, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have to do things within banking hours is still ridiculous. Like a Visa payment on Saturday, you get punished for it, based on time. It can take like 5 days.
Yes.
So, like just little things like that. And that's not even talking about blockchain or crypto
Correct.
or anything like that.
Correct. Just on the fintech side.
So it's just on the open banking side.
So look, can I paint a vision of what it could look like? Do I have, would I make a bet on this on Polymarket that I would win? Probably not. Right. So we're just having an open discussion of what's needed for Canada to try to establish its place, as a not even a leader, just a keep up with the times. Right. Leadership, I think, we've lost that opportunity, and this is just being very open in my view. I think to have an opportunity to claim the lead, to lose it, and then to regain it is extremely difficult unless you're a mega player like the U.S. You can go from an administration that's anti something to an administration that is, and then just rally the troops. But we don't have that global size or impact in Canada.
So from what you're seeing globally, which market do you find the most interesting? What do they have that would be cool for us to kind of import in the context of what we're talking about?
So the reality is look, the all the talk is in the U.S. right now because of the Bitcoin strategic reserve, but I mean, to me, it's just there's so much momentum just because they're just enabling things to catch up. So the spring was compressed for so long that now all of a sudden, it just pops. And so all the news is coming from there. So what have they done? Okay. So, they're allowing ETFs. They're preventing a brain drain, right? So now all of a sudden the talent could thrive back in the US. And so, and you're going to see talent come back. And so what they've done is stabilize and caught up to par. Now, what that will do though is they will continue to see that momentum, but nothing that they've created is mind blowing today. They just caught back up.
When you say par, like who are you comparing them to?
Canada, Europe, other jurisdictions. Like, it's just basic access without afraid of being sued or being blacklisted because you own crypto, right? Like, it was, in other words, just back up to par of basic access to the space and enabling companies to thrive without worrying that you're going to get sued, because you couldn't have a conversation with the regulators without worrying, am I going to leave there, with a Wells notice or not, right? So it was very, very complicated. So the hedge was, let's go offshore, right? You got Coinbase and Kraken and all these other players were hedging their bets by getting licenses, in different jurisdictions, saying, we want to innovate at home. We're going to fight at home. But if it gets to a point where, we can't win at some point, we're just going to, turn our heads and go, right? So they were preparing to fight, but also they had their hedges, right? So what this has done now is just saying it's safe to innovate at home, right? Invest back in the US. and give access to people, basic products, right? So that's why I'm saying par is that, because globally, generally, like some jurisdictions don't have it, but generally speaking, right? If you look at Singapore, Hong Kong, Europe, Canada, and others, that was par. You could build here without getting stood out of existence. Now, could you scale here? That's a different story. And you could access it here without having to worry. Yes. So access, and you could build. So if you're an entrepreneur, you could do something. If you're an investor, you can do something. Now, innovation's a different story. What I'm seeing in some jurisdictions where the innovation is happening is, for example, VARA. Now, do I think that the U.S. could copy the playbook there and bring all the innovation there? But in terms of enabling net new ideas to thrive, that's where there's a lot of really interesting action happening, whether it's on the tokenization front, enabling, for example, crypto exchanges to be also distributing brokers, trying to plug in with the technology side, with the regulatory side, with the banking side. And so again, there is it known globally? No. Is it still mostly an R&D phase? Yes. But whenever I'm there, whenever I talk to my team that's based out there, at least that's their whole mission. They established not only regulation, but a regulatory body specifically for enabling innovation to happen. So let's see where it goes. But I would be looking there for policies and ideas to bring back home. And I think the U.S. is probably going to do that to keep the talent and the innovation from happening in the U.S.
So you mentioned tokenizing.
Yeah.
So what have you been seeing in that area that's interesting?
Yeah. So I think we're still early days, but here's like I said, our playbook was for 3IQ to how we help move the space forward, right? So step one, give access. Yes, it's a TradFi product, but it's giving broad-based adoption to the future of finance in a regulated product. Step two, how do we bake in innovation to help secure the networks through staking, et cetera? The ultimate goal is to go on chain. So I'll give you the prime example of really cool, fascinating things. So stablecoins are called stablecoins, not tokenized money market or tokenized treasuries, right? Because right now, real world assets is what people say, tokenize a VC fund or tokenize a real estate building. So they still don't know how to call it, but stablecoins have a name and they have a use case. So I'll give you an example. There are a few technology providers out in the Middle East that we've met that are plugged into some of the African banking ecosystem players. So they don't have access to SWIFT. They don't have access to the US dollar, and the local currency is going to hell. And so people want to swap whatever they make, right, for US currency. We could argue if that's the currency they should be buying or not, but nonetheless, they want that. So it's a simple swap from your bank account to USDC, USDT in a self-custody wallet, and they're just a tech provider swap, right? So they're not custodying for you. It's just the swapping mechanism. So through user interface, abstracting the use case, super simple, and the bank makes money on that. So now you have these individuals at least protecting to a certain level their purchasing power. Compared to their currency. Now the currency is still debasing, but less fast than their local currency. So step one achieved. Now you're on chain. Now these individuals are on chain. They have the self-custody access to their wallet. They want to deploy it. How do you then use it? Yes, you can make payments wallet to wallet, but put payments aside. How do I deploy that capital? How the whole goal of financial inclusion is yes, whether it's being able to get paid, or to be able to transact, but also banking services like we were talking about, whether it's investing products, whether it's loans, et cetera. And so now these individuals are going back to these tech providers and saying, how do I invest my stablecoins into something other than whatever I could swap on SushiSwap, right? Like I don't want to go buy some project that may or may not go anywhere. I may want to buy, something that, North Americans have access to, but why do I not have access to? So the vision here, my vision and our vision, is that that's where tokenization can lead to, is global access to the mega sort of opportunities that we see in the financial engineering that we were seeing, whether it is access to North American products that we're used to, European products, Asian products. Why wouldn't we make that globally accessible, globally settable? So once you're on chain, you want to remain on chain. Whether it's lending that out and earning a yield, whether it's investing in a product, you should be able to do all that on chain. Because if not, you have to go back to your bank and swap it back to your local currency to buy a product that bank does not have access to. There are still mega limitations. So for that to happen, technology can enable it. For it to really function, there needs to be two problems solved. Number one, it all comes down to adoption. Accredited investor laws have to evolve with the times, because yes, can I tokenize something? But I'm going to block who can have access to it because they're not accredited investors. So if we're going to tokenize, the innovation that's happening in the markets, we have to also evolve the regulations to meet the demand. So that's one. Hopefully that happens, and I think we're going to see some jurisdictions do it first. And number two, the adoption will lead to more volume. So we get approached often by other asset managers saying, can you help us tokenize this illiquid product? Thinking that there's going to be an instant secondary market on DeFi. That's not the case right now. But this is where the reality meets the technology. That oftentimes as technologists, we know that the technology can solve the problem. Tokenization and the DeFi ecosystem does do all of that I described. Now we need to grow adoption for liquidity, awareness, and accessibility. And that will shift through early stage R&D and early projects that could gain momentum. That's what we're working on. We're partnering with ecosystem players. We're partnering with others to build use cases where people's like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I could access it. There's enough demand. And then you create the springboard effect. And then over time, regulation will change. So technology can do it today. It's another decade, maybe less, but at least another decade until the full potential of tokenization gets realized. But those are real world use cases, real world problems. And I believe that's the trend, and that's where we're headed. We just had an offsite a few weeks ago, and I was just giving an internal keynote to some of the new employees, saying here's the potential and here's the role we're trying to play, right? But I was sharing my story like I did at the beginning. But there's a world where whether you call it Starlink or any satellite-based high-speed internet gives empowers anyone globally. You have cloud computing and information, like we have terabytes of information per second being created. You have AI that's going to allow people to process all that information. So now you have someone anywhere globally that has the opportunity to get educated, for free, anywhere, right? And we have a more global economy now. So at some point, I was just giving the story. Imagine someone, I was tying it back to my previous life, with a new version of the one laptop per child laptop, right? Access to global satellite and AI tools and global information, gets educated, unleashes their personal potential, and then is bold enough to come knocking on our door saying, I want to come work for 3IQ. All right, I want to do something with 3IQ. And they're somewhere around the world, and they come and ping us online, and we say, you know what? We'd love to give you an opportunity. That person does not have a bank account or access to a bank account. How do you employ that person, right? This is where, again, we were talking about cross-border payments or things of that nature. This is where crypto is that fourth leg to, the AI, cloud computing, and internet revolution that we're going to see. Because if individuals can now get educated and be aware of what's happening globally and want to have an opportunity, if they can get paid or have access to financial services, it's going to be a really frustrating, revolting moment in history for all of that, right? So that's the fourth leg. And for us to be able to play a slow, steady, but hopefully impactful role is what drives us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the stablecoin stuff and also some of the other activities that are happening in crypto, it is going to create more competitive global pressure for sure.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, one of my first businesses I did, I started globally first, and it just I lost so much money on trying to build it just by being global first, rather than build something in your local market and then kind of step up.
Yeah.
But I think some of the things this technology can do can reduce that cost and friction to be able to compete globally faster, especially in tech.
100%, particularly as the audience now are on various social channels, right? So you can build an awareness. Again, you got to be good at what you do. You have to be you have to be willing to do the work, but definitely it's not like if you need to understand how to advertise in what magazine in what country. You just tap in, just build a community online, right? Tap into to the social ecosystems and build a bunch of ambassadors, and then all of a sudden you can scale globally first. I 100% believe that. And fundamentally, unless you are playing on the financial services side, if you remove that and you play on the technology side, there are no real barriers, to give global access. There's no real regulatory, barriers to unleash your company or your tool globally right now, unless you're touching finance. But that's changing.
Yeah, I mean, like crypto has allowed people access to capital that you couldn't otherwise get.
100%.
Like even if you look at it in terms of crowdsourcing,
Yep.
That was heavily regulated here.
Yeah.
And in other jurisdictions. But I mean, I think one of the other competitive avenues is access to capital. It's one of the competitive advantages of being in a first or a developed market, is that you have access to capital more so than the rest
100%. I mean, if you think about it, right? Like Polymarket called, the power of the crowd, right, and the data called most of the election stuff, and tends to call winners on a bunch of things, just not because they're smarter than anything else. You're just analyzing the data, right? It's just real data. It's not filtered data. It's nothing. It's just real data. So if you think about that from a capital allocation perspective for, call it a venture fund, like imagine a world where you have a DAO that gets created, and that mission of the DAO is to allocate to emerging technology startups, and that pool of capital is deployed based on the thinking of the DAO of the crowd, right? So totally there is a world, if regulation would allow it and if things could scale, where you have a global DAO investing and deploying capital into emerging technologies, where the founders pitch to the community, and the community votes for where the capital goes, and it's their capital and they benefit. I think would be it's the technology now allows it, but I think that's where it's going. So there is going to be a competitive pressure on centralized, sort of behind the walls scenes of some of these global players that are just known to control the future fate of which entrepreneur gets the money. Let the community decide. I think we're going there.
Yeah, no, I do think, well, a possible future is definitely more decentralized for sure.
Yes.
So talking about all the future here, I guess what's next for 3IQ, or have you figured out what Web 4 is?
Web 4 is basically being plugged directly. Is probably the integration of the physical and the virtual, which Neuralink and others are testing. We'll see, but we'll save that for another podcast. But what's next for us is in that sort of stream of our mission, definitely what we've seen this cycle. Every cycle, you have the people on YouTube saying the institutions are coming. The reality is, this cycle they are. My hope, and again, there's the technology and then there's the price, right? The problem is price drives behavior, right? And so when people were saying, what were you hoping from this cycle? I'll disappoint investors because I'll say I was hoping for I call it a pump and grind cycle and a pump and grind. And so the when Lambo or the when Moon, I was hoping for it to be delayed. In other words, slower, right? Mm-hmm. Because, as much as, people, it creates great news fare and it's great for social channels and for people to make money really quickly, the pumps and the dumps are not healthy for global adoption, right? And so the price action we're seeing now is what I'd hoped for. I mean, if I would have told you 2 years ago that Bitcoin would be over 100,000 US, would you complain? Probably not, right? Now people are saying, Bitcoin went from, 105 to 100 and people are bored. I'm like, well, come on guys, like it's buying time for institutions to study the technology, to work with firms like 3IQ to get educated, to come to market with things. And that what it does, here's what it does, right? So for example, some of the people in the industry I know are saying we have to act fast in the US because if there's a regime change in a few years, they may undo the policies that were done. True, politically they could do that, but if you bring in the institutions and the big players and they adopt it now, good luck changing that, right? So for us right now, our priority is the institutionalization of the space. So we're spending a ton of time on the consulting front, white labeling front, partnership front, because the more we bring in the big guys, the more it just sets the path that we all know it's going to take. And then the R&D side is really on the on-chain. The picture of the on-chain world we've painted is still a decade away. You're going to see progression every year. It's not like if it's going to happen overnight, but we're investing dollars and time there as well. So what's next for 3IQ is protecting the space through its institutionalization, which I believe is important. So we are working on that, and then investing heavily time, energy, and dollars to be an on-chain asset manager to provide that future or play a role in that future that I talked about of global financial inclusion. Those are the priorities above and beyond the new products we've launched, but those are just part of our original core business. But our focus and our attention to our mission is institutionalization short term, on chain long term.
Okay. Well, we're coming close to the end here, so this is where I ask some random questions.
Sure.
Nothing tricky. But first one is, what are you currently reading, or is there a particular book you'd like to highlight as an influence?
Yeah, so like I mentioned a few at the beginning, right now, just personally, I'm just much more in the just reading a lot of biographies of people who've influenced different spaces. I guess that's where I'm at in my personal journey. But fundamentally, from what influenced me as an entrepreneur and into the space, like I said, from a macro perspective, The Creature from Jekyll Island is not a short read. It's a deep read, but for those who are passionate about macro, is definitely one that I would recommend. For entrepreneurs and others, I mean, there's been a lot of great books, but a lot of them given towards innovation, like 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel and those type of things, like thinking about creating something new were books that influenced me when I was much younger. In terms of tools though, like I am less about, I still read a ton, but what I'm reading much more, reports that I'm using deep research on. So I'm using AI tools and I'm asking a ton of questions. I'm sending ChatGPT and Gemini. I'm using these two tools right now a ton, using the deep research tool to just go and build a thesis around deep questions that I have, and then reading those reports. And so I'm kind of self-curating what I'm reading right now. So it's not like if I'm going to recommend a book or this or that, but I'm basically just like curious about stuff. I just grill the hell out of it into AI, and then I say go, and I click deep research, and then I let it run for half an hour, and it comes back with these 50, 60 page thesis reports. And I'm just compounding my learning right now at a level. And you take that and you ask it another question and send it again on a deep research. So I'm deep into clicking that deep research. So I'm hammering the tokens, the token use on ChatGPT. I'm definitely maximizing my subscription per month. And then the other one is also the voice. So I'm trying to blend more and more. So how do I stay active, mentally, physically active, and so go for walks or go to the gym? And basically, my mind's always racing. And as an entrepreneur, most founders and entrepreneurs, my minds are always thinking. And deep thinkers like yourself, mind's always thinking. So how do I engage with someone or something to process that? So now I'm at the gym now on a treadmill talking to AI and getting weird looks around, saying, "Who the hell is this guy talking to right now?" But I'm just having an open conversation with the voice feature, and just brainstorming, challenging it, being challenged, etc. So I'm right now, I would say, deep into integrating AI into my day-to-day as much as possible, as being my sidekick, a second brain.
I've found AI, I have like ChatGPT and similar. I really need to have self-discipline. It's become social media for me.
Okay.
Because I go in there and I start doing something, and then it puts me down a rabbit hole of whatever it is I'm trying to discover, whatever it is I'm trying to build.
Yeah.
And then now it asks you, would you like me to do X, Y, Z? And then I'm like, I didn't think about that.
Sure.
Sure. Yes. Do this. And then that puts you down another web of things.
Yes.
And then also whenever I have an idea, I throw it in there. And so what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to put things that are not maybe so important on the one time
Okay.
chat, so it deletes itself, so
Okay.
that if I change, then I'm out of it. I can get out of it. But like that seems to be like, I was pretty productive with it at first, but all of a sudden now it's kind of changed a little bit, and now seem to be spending more time in there for whatever it is I'm researching or developing
Yes.
or ideas or thoughts and stuff like that.
This self-discipline still matters, so good on you for discovering that. But yes, these tools are, if you want to compound your effectiveness and your learning, it's incredible right now.
So last question here. So looking back on your experience, what advice would you give your younger self?
So, great question. Actually, that I know the answer because I share it now to everyone. It's the journey, not the destination. So if I look back now, the moments where I've had the most fun and learned a ton, and it has been during the building phase. It's the going back to my younger self. I was very hard on myself. I was about getting to the destination, and the older I get now, and the more companies I've been involved with, and I advise this to a lot of the founders I work with, and even people in my company, enjoy the moment, because it's very hard to be part of a wave of adoption, of influence, or to be able to participate in something. And even if your startup fails or not, the fact that you took a shot on yourself is amazing. And so enjoy the journey, be a little less hard on yourself, because when I was younger, it was all about the destination and being extremely hard on myself. So that's what I've learned, and it's helped actually be able to take more on and help more people with that kind of thinking.
Oh, nice. And as we conclude this, is there any social feeds or links that you would like people to follow to find out more about 3IQ or yourself?
Yeah, no. So I'm not personally not super active. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can reach me out. Just search for my name, Pascal Saint-Jean, on LinkedIn. Happy to connect and build relationships, of course. 3IQ is very active on social, so we have our X handle, our LinkedIn handle, and others. And so you can come to our website and click on our socials there. But you'll see a lot of the exciting things that are happening from the team, and we're also doing a lot of media these days just to get more brand awareness, but also just having open discussions like this about the future and finding ways to collaborate with other technology providers, other entrepreneurs, and just continuing to tap into the community, because there's just a lot of really cool things happening right now.
All right, great. Thanks for doing this.
Of course, anytime. Thank you.
You can find information about the Candid Capital podcast on the website, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Episodes can be found on Spotify and other podcast platforms. A quick reminder that this is infotainment and is not intended to be professional advice, malicious, or hateful. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not represent those of employers, partners, and their subsequent connected private and public associations or organizations.
We canned it, I hope you understand it. Your business growth, we planned it, yeah. This ain't for show, we stamped it, yeah. No FOMO, everyone come join, no solo. This all factual, from me to you, this Candid Capital.